Tower Topics is turning 1 year old tomorrow. Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are and that's who we care about.
So, Ryan,
Yes.
we've been doing this now for a year, 3 episodes a week.
Yeah.
It's been a fast year. It's gone by fast.
Yeah, and the number of episodes, we didn't even celebrate number 100 because it crept up on us so quickly.
Oh yeah, we're well over that mark now.
Yeah, if you do 3 episodes a week for an entire year, that's more in the 150 range. I don't think we've missed any that I know of. And
no, not at all. It's been a fun ride for us. And, it's kind of interesting, Ryan, how this all got started, because before we launched Attractions Group podcast, we originally wanted to do a Kings Island podcast, but because, I was employed by Kings Island Cedar Fair at the time, we certainly weren't going to be able to do that. There would have been a conflict of interest there. So we started the Attractions Group podcast. But I remember we were at a Reds game. I think it was like late April last year. And, we were talking about how Attractions Group was going well. But we really wanted to one day do Tower Topics. I think we came up with the name for it that night, actually, because we kicked around different name ideas, and we kind of settled in on, well, whenever we do this, let's call it Tower Topics.
Yes.
A couple of days later, you already had a logo and everything, and I remember you saying, well, it's unfortunately it's going to be a long way off before we can do that, because you didn't foresee that I would quit or anything at Kings Island. But I kept telling you, we'll be able to get to it. It's coming. And then as we got to the end of June last year, I let you know that we're ready to launch, and it was on July 20th last summer that we dropped the first episode.
Yeah, I remember, because we recorded Attractions Group, and every once in a while you would, after we get done recording, you would, text me a thought or something like, I thought it went well, or, hey, rearrange this or something like that, or put in this photo. But you texted me one night, and this is, I guess, a little bit before July 20th. And you were like, hey, call me. I'm like, all right. So I called you, and you told me at that point about your departure from Kings Island. Because, as I said, I was the last to know. I'm not sure if I even know yet at this point. But it was kind of in the same breath of, hey, just to let you know, I'm no longer with Kings Island, so go ahead and launch the Tower Topic stuff. So
yeah, I said go ahead and announce that we're going to be starting this. And that was actually, I think we got past 4th of July, because we had done a couple of Tower or Attraction Group podcasts before really anybody knew that I had left Kings Island.
Yes.
And I remember when I was hired by Kings Island, you were the first one to reach out to me. I was in Albany, New York, working for a hockey team there. And I think you sent me an email, and you just said, so do you have anything you want to share with me? And I said, yeah. I said, I save 15% of my car insurance by switching to Geico.
I remember.
And you were like, no, you know what I'm talking about. And so you were, in the know before anyone else knew the media or any of the other, park guests, anybody at Kings Island outside of the, the small group of individuals that interviewed me and made the offer to me that I was going to Kings Island. So I thought for sure my departure date was June 27th, 4:01 p.m. And I thought for sure by the time I got back home, you would have gotten, wind of it and would have reached out. And then the next day we did the Attractions Group podcast, and I thought Ryan's going to ask me about this. You didn't. The next week we did the Attractions Group podcast. You didn't mention it again. And I remember after we got done recording, I went into the living room and told my wife, and I said, he hasn't asked about it yet. And I said, if he knows, he's not asking me. And she said, well, you should probably tell him, because you don't want him to find out from other people or anything. And then I remember calling you saying, hey, go ahead and put it out there, and let's get this moving forward. And a couple weeks later, and we launched with the first episode. And like I said, it's been a really, really fun ride. And, I've enjoyed doing these episodes with you, and it's been really nice to hear the listener feedback that we received. We'll get it either through emails to us personally, messages through our social media accounts. People are messaging us on the Tower Topic social media accounts, or we'll see people at the park and they'll let us know, how much they enjoy the episodes, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's they're so easy. They really are. I mean, we've put a lot of work into all this, but as far as the actual conversations, they're incredibly easy for especially us.
Oh yeah,
Because there's very little research that we have to do because we know a lot of this stuff, especially you with these older rides.
I grew up with it. It's
Mhm.
been it's part of the fabric of my life. I've been closely associated with it since 1981 when I was starting my journey on the racer roller coaster, to 10,000 rides during that decade, and stayed very close to it after 1990, and was there for, invited to every single media event that the park did, basically from, the 1981 season after I got started on the racer, all the way through working there. So there wasn't a media event that I wasn't there, or uh, something happening at the park that I didn't know about. So very, closely tied to it. And, you, through your work with KI Central as the media director there, you were very, close to everything since about 2002, 2003 range, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
2003-ish, late 2003, I think is when we started it.
Yeah. So you kind of, stepped into where I was, where, uh, you'd be in the know about what was going on, and the park would let you know. They'd invite you into the marketing office, sit you down, and say, "Hey, we're going to be doing this and that," and letting you know what was happening before things were even announced. And so we both have had a lot of a lot of involvement with Kings Island, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to go into the whole diatribe of how the synergy between you and I worked back when you were the PR person and I ran KI Central. But to give the short of it, it was you guys would be working on something. Sometimes you would bring me on board from the standpoint of KI Central in terms of this is how we want to present it, or because with KIC, the relationship with the park was so good that it wasn't uncommon that news outlets would go there looking for ideas for stories, or would go there for clarification, because pretty often, you get a press release and it talks about the Robbie Knievel jump, and it's kind of like, well, you can't put every detail in there. So what, it's in the parking lot, it's not across the fountain, stuff like that. Yeah, that's just an example off the top of my head. But on KIC, somebody would ask that and they would get an answer either from you or from somebody in the know, or later materials have been released by the park, and that's how somebody found out. So it was a fantastic synergy. And I was the same way. As soon as I got involved in KI Central, my first like recording, but like weird extracurricular event for the park was a television filming in like 2002 or 2003 for Tomb Raider: The Ride, when Jeffrey Siebert was running marketing communications there. And then from there, I went up to every TV filming, every media day, until you were not making that decision anymore. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to.
Well, the other thing about it too, Ryan, is when I was doing the PR there, is there were going to be a lot of different stories that were not major news, but I wanted the media to cover it. And if I knew that, by giving you something and you putting it out there, maybe it was a blog that I had done or something, and there was a lot of conversation on KI Central about it.
Yes.
That the media, as often as they were searching and looking at KI Central, they would see that there was a lot of interest in this. So when they would get that information from me, that pitch about something, they knew that the audience was there for it. So it helped to be able to get a lot of those earned media placements because of that relationship that you and I had.
Yes, and so one thing that kind of comes to mind is when I feel like I knew my audience well enough to be able to fashion, because if you got me in front of them first, then I could fashion the narrative in a way that makes sense to them. And an example that kind of comes to mind is when they flipped over the backward racer to the frontward racer. Your approach, which was probably the correct approach. I mean, it clearly was, because there were no protesters, but you were talking about how the ride originally was and stuff like that. My approach, I was thinking like, because I used to take your press releases and write actual articles on it rather than just copying the press release,
Right.
because that's no fun and that's not creative. But the angle I took was, now it's time to rekindle that rivalry between the red and the blue racer. And I remember people on there like saying like, oh, I was mad about the backward racer, but think about it that way, that's really cool. So again, it was, my scope was much smaller than yours, but I knew that audience. And if things had gone sour, especially with things getting out of hand, like this is a little bit before social media, but the story would have been, in today's world, if not handled properly, that they flipped over a side of the racer. It's essentially taking away a ride, and people are upset about it. But that wasn't the narrative. You got some pushback. I remember you being on 700 WLW. I listened to you on there, and you had to defend your position. And granted, you've made it very clear that was not your decision. That was an executive. I'm not going to dox anybody, but that was an
But I
executive.
also did say at the time, though, that from my own personal standpoint too, that I did prefer when both sides went forward. So I, clarified it that way too, that it wasn't just while it was a management decision, I had no part in. It was also something that I was excited to see from a park fan standpoint.
Yeah, but if you had gone in there and said, like, I don't like this, but I'm supposed to tell you this, like, how would that have gone? You should try that sometime with one of your freelance gigs.
Well, my relationship was good enough with the media that I probably could have said that right before they pushed the record button, and then we just would have talked about it. But no, I think, too, Ryan, with Tower Topics, you and I both knew that there was a, kind of a void out there in terms of storytelling, that the Kings Island fan, they love the park. They love hearing the stories. They love the history. And we knew in launching this podcast that, we would, somewhat fill a void that was there.
I agree. And it's one of those things where I think we stepped in where Kings Island, of all parks, except for maybe Cedar Point, should have already done this. They should have started it 2 years ago. So we stepped in where they didn't, and almost can't now.
Yeah.
Because,
but it was one of those things too, where, when I was in the PR role and able to be the big storyteller, the primary storyteller for the park, I was able to get those stories out there into the news media. And then it kind of transitioned into, when I went into the digital side, took that and started doing that on the Kings Island blog, integrating it into social media. And I think that, as we got into the 2023 season, that was curtailed a little bit, not able to do that as often or as in the way that it had been done and successfully done. So I knew that the blogs were successful. People loved, the historical stories that I was publishing. They loved, the different updates and different takes on things around the park, whether it was, what was in the sweet spot or the sunrise story, whatever it was. Everyone was consuming that and they enjoyed that. And I knew that that could go to another platform like a podcast, and it could be successful. And we've been able to do that. And based on the feedback that we've been getting from our audience, our listeners, that they enjoy what we're doing, and we appreciate that.
Do you have a favorite episode we've done? Does anything come to mind?
Like I said, it's when you're doing 3 a week, it's almost like when you're in a TV sitcom. Somebody asks what's your favorite episode, you don't always think back to it because you're on to the next one. Right after you do one, you don't really get to enjoy the moment that way. But I would think that I really like the one we just did about the house inside the fort on the train.
Yeah.
I really liked that one. I think that one would be, top of mind, probably because it was recent. I like the one that we did when we had Susan K. Wyatt on, talking about her getting her career started as a performer at Kings Island. Alton Fitzgerald White.
Yeah, another good one.
Another one from entertainment. I really enjoyed that conversation with Alton. Very engaging, and I think our audience liked that one too. So those are the 3 that probably come to top of mind for me. What about you, Ryan?
So for me, I don't want to whittle it down to just one, but I will say that my favorite type of episode is when I get to relive stuff. Like, for example, when we did an episode on the Robbie Knievel jump or the Walinda walk or whatever, because those experiences were so positive for me. You know, I don't really get to sit around and think about them too often. But
No, and we both did those in a different kind of way. I mean, you were
yes.
the guest point of view, and mine was, from the beginning, getting the deal done with Robbie Knievel and Nick Walinda to come in and do, their things and promoting it, taking them around on media tours, and then, seeing that, culmination leading up to, building the interest, the excitement, the hype for what they were going to do, and then seeing how the crowd reacted to it. So we both saw it different ways, and I think that also helps when you're doing a podcast like we do here, that we both have different perspective on things.
Yeah, so let's ask the listeners. So leave a comment. Let us know what's your favorite, let's say, kind of episode. The historical ones, the ones on rides, the ones on events, the ones that are just commentary. I mean, if you look, I actually just organized the videos we have into playlists, and that's what kind of made me break down the categories. Very few of them don't fall into one or more of those categories, but we always we try to diversify our 3 episodes we record a week. Usually one ride, usually one maybe historical event, and maybe one commentary, stuff like that. It doesn't always work out that way.
And you tell me, Ryan, that you enjoy when we do the rides, especially the ones that are no longer there, ones you never got a chance to experience, that you enjoy that as well yourself, learning about these rides.
Oh yeah, well, you have to care. I do care about the history of Kings Island, so I love hearing these rides. And I mean, just as an example, the most previous episode dropped from this one was on the Zodiac, a double arm Ferris wheel. I honestly thought it was a device that went like tilted up and down during the cycle. I didn't realize that one loaded while the other one did its Ferris wheel thing, and then they would switch, and the other one would unload while it did its Ferris wheel thing. I entitled that episode "Kings Island used to have a weird Ferris wheel," by the way.
Yeah,
that was the most truth thing I could think of for it. But
yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Yeah, but well, we're going to talk about T-shirts, but don't go anywhere. We're going to do listener questions, and somebody asked a very, very juicy one.
Well, before we get to that, as we move forward, we've done this now for a year. We have 3 episodes a week. We're already kind of past that midway point of the summer, so we're going to get to the point where Kings Island is not open daily anymore as we get into the mid to late August range. But one of the things we want to do as we get into the fall and the winter months is we also want to do some episodes where we're taking your Kings Island stories. So we'll have more about that as we get into the fall. But we'll do episodes where it's you telling us your stories, and we'll read them on the podcast, and we'll have one episode a week where it's 3 or 4 of the stories that we receive. We'll read those, and that'll keep it interesting as well, because as we say at the start of every episode, Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans, which is Ryan and I, for Kings Island fans, which is you. So we want you to be as much of a part of this podcast as we are by sharing your Kings Island stories, and we'll have more to say about that as we get to the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, we're tentatively planning a meetup. What we're looking at is Saturday, July 27th, to watch the Carnival parade. So the park hasn't announced a lot of details about Carnival, even though they're 4 days out from it as of this recording. But we're going to assume that the parade starts at 9, which is the rumor. So on Saturday, July 27th, we're going to meet at 8:30 around the Racer exit and watch the parade from there. And maybe hit the carousel and then watch Under the Stars. So more information on that. Just pencil that in. The times and the date are subject to change, but we wanted to let everyone know that that's where our head is. But we'll be able to.
Yeah, and Ryan and I, with this meetup, we also will look at that as an opportunity for us to meet you. We want to know who our listeners are. So, we're going to do that meetup. Tentative date right now, July 27th.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I mean, Don, as you said, we're just getting started. As they said for the Cedar Point 150th, the fun is just beginning. But it feels like we have barely scratched the surface of what we intend to do with this podcast. I often get people that ask, aren't you going to run out of things to talk about with 3 a week? No. because sometimes we have ideas for stuff we want to talk about and they get bumped for better stuff, like the merger was a good one that took up a bunch. And if they announce a new event or something's new or whatever, that's all getting started. But Don, tell me about your shirt you're wearing.
Well, my shirt, it is a official Tower Topics t-shirt. You might have seen guests wearing these at Kings Island, or maybe when you're out and about, grocery shopping at a Reds game or something. But if you're a fan of the show, you can get your Tower Topics t-shirt. They come in this North Carolina blue color, come in whatever size you may need, just $22. That includes shipping. And once you've placed your order, it just takes a matter of days to get your shirt. We will send you a way to order those through Venmo after you message us. Send us a direct message, whether it's on our X, which is Tower_Topics, or you can reach out to either one of us directly through our social channels, or if you see us out in public somewhere and say, I want one of those shirts, and we'll make sure that we get that information to you. And everyone that has purchased a t-shirt, we appreciate your support of the show.
Yeah, we love seeing them around. So let's move on to the listener questions. First listener question. This one comes from Mark T, Cleveland, Ohio. What are your thoughts on the new Six Flags content creators policy? Mark, I am glad you asked, because we thought about actually just doing an episode on this content creators policy. But since you asked, I'm going to pull this up. Actually, let's walk through this, Don.
Okay.
So people know what we're talking about, because this was kind of the buzz online for a while. And a lot of it on the surface seems pretty fair. Some of it, I feel like, could use quite a bit of clarification. So this
go ahead and read them down. Yeah, you read them, Ryan, each one, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's get on the list. So content creators, this is on all the websites. This is particularly from Kings Island's website. At Kings Island, we're happy to work with content creators who support our park values and are excited to help tell our story. However, we will not work with influencers whose content or personal activity does the following. And here are all the bullet points. Number 1, does not support our park values: integrity, courtesy, inclusiveness, safety, service, cleanliness. So if you're not clean, like if you don't wash your hands, okay. So look, first of all, I want to say that the values of the company, which this is kind of news that it's transferring over to Six Flags, because these were the cornerstones of Kings Island. I think inclusiveness was added more recently, but integrity, courtesy, inclusiveness, safety, service, and cleanliness. That would be a hard thing to either prove or disprove from a guest standpoint. But I would say that these are all noble causes. I would just ask that employees of the park exercise the same when working with the influencers.
I agree with that.
Okay, next point. Bullies, harasses, or discriminates against other people or associates online or in the park. Okay. How do you discriminate against an employee? Is it like I won't let you eat at my restaurant or something? Like I don't understand. I'm asking honestly, because it seems like this is like a wide net thing where it's like if you are in the Cedar Point region and you say that you didn't think that Coaster Mania was very good, is that a discriminating or harassing or bullying Tony Clark? Like, is that the card that we're going to try to pull?
It gives them a wide net to cast in terms of how they're evaluating those that would apply to be a content creator.
Okay,
so it's given them a lot of room to work with.
Right. Third point, shows behind the scenes or restricted areas without park approval. I guess with the Train House episode, we're not allowed to be content creators working with them anymore.
Well, I mean, that's not, there was nothing out of bounds about it. They talk about it on the train, when they're going through, they'll whoever's on the mic will say there's a house in there, you know, and talk about what it is. So no.
Well,
I think what, you know, if flying a drone over, you know, the park,
Yeah.
trying to get access to something, or, you know, hopping through a fence to get a look at something, opening a gate and going back and you know, getting photos of coaster track or something before the park releases it. Yeah, I'm 100% on board with that. I mean, you should wait for the park to, you know, release those photos, those videos, you know, when there's those kind of things that are happening with new coasters being built and that. But you know, if something's available to see, you know, through a fence or from the Eiffel Tower, you know, you take a photo of it, or if something is available, you know, been filed with the city, it's a matter of public record. You know, you're not breaking any laws or anything there if you do that.
Okay. Shares park insider information, like what you just discussed, including but not limited to photos, video, documents, or details about future events or attractions without park approval. Well, I guess we're not invited to their bat mitzvah with the whole Soak City thing that we put out, but that's public record. That was all over the place before we were the last to report it, essentially, because it was on Reddit and KI Central in the season pass group. Even when we did the episode, when I posted in the season pass group about it, a lot of comments were like, "Yeah, we saw this the other day." You know,
Yeah,
but
I mean, people know with that, but I mean, read that again, Ryan.
Shares park insider information, including but not limited to photos, video, documents, or details about future events/attractions without park approval.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Ryan.
Don't ask me about this policy because it's nonsense. But yeah.
No, but I mean, it's just without park approval. Okay, now you and I, we're not going to ask the park for approval to do the episode about what's coming to Soak City because it was a matter of public record.
Right.
So if they wanted to hold that against us because we didn't ask them, you know, I mean, come on. Everyone else is writing about it, talking about it. So I think that, you know, at that point, it would go back to that part where they talk about, you know, either discriminates against or not, you know, being inclusive in that should be a two-way street there, because there's people that they'll rule out because they did that. You know,
did I not say that all I ask in return for bullet point 1 of supporting park values, integrity, courtesy, inclusiveness, safety, service, and cleanliness, so long as they do that when working with influencers, then it should be accepted that the influencer do that as well. Again, it's a two-way street, like you said. So anyway, violates park safety rules, code of conduct, or creator guidelines. So, violates safety rules or code of conduct. Okay, indisputable. Completely agree. Or creator guidelines. So they won't work with you if you violate anything on this list, including violating anything on this list. Great job, guys. Next up, includes copyright infringement and or unauthorized use of Cedar Fair intellectual property. So I think that would be, I think that the spirit of the policy means that you got yourself a hold of the logo for the next ride and you put that up. But
you could say, you know, Six Flags intellectual property, you know, would now be, if you wanted to take a picture of the entrance to Snoopy Soapbox Racers, technically that's their intellectual property with that logo. So they can kind of pick and choose. You know, if you posted that on your social media, they could say, Ryan used something that was our intellectual property there by posting a picture of that logo on his social media.
Which would be discrimination, which is against bullet point 1, I might add, the First Amendment of this document. All right, last one. Portrays the park. This is the funniest one. Portrays the park or any other Cedar Fair park in an inappropriate manner. So basically, if you have anything negative to say about the parks whatsoever, technically they don't have to work with you under this policy. But that's right. What this whole policy is. It's because, you know, they want to try to control the influencers the way that they can't control the media, you know?
Right. So basically what they want is, if you're not going to be a shill, you're not going to be part of this content creator program for them.
Don, I guess the real question is, should we fill out the application?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if you are a content creator, here's the thing you should be first and foremost concerned with. So building credibility with your audience, that matters more than any invite to media day. Your authenticity is going to be being a shill every time, because if you're just a cheerleader for these parks, that comes across, and anything you put out there is not believable. So we've seen, the group that, in recent times has been invited for these construction tours and things. And, there's maybe only a couple. There's only a couple of them. Would you really put stock in what they're writing about? The other ones, everything's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. And it's, and I let's tell it like it is. It's, and no offense to anybody if you consider yourself to be part of this group, but this is what it's whittled down to, because with this policy, and this policy is not any different. This is just written now. They pick and choose. If you have anything negative to say, if the food portions were too small, then you're not coming to my bar mitzvah, I guess. But now, especially, it started with Top Thrill 2, and somebody posted this online, and it rang true. And now it's just going to be true for all the parks. Somebody said, with people being invited or not invited to Top Thrill 2 based on you said something mean about Cedar Point or said that Great America was better or something. How am I supposed to believe anybody's assessment of Top Thrill 2 that went to media day?
Or you said this coaster was better than Millennium Force, and that, I mean, it's
okay. So let me lay this down. This is going to be one of the famous Ryan rants. It's very clear they would not want to work with us. The feeling is very mutual at this point, because I would not bow down to any kind of criteria. I don't have a problem not violating park rules or, integrity, courtesy, and so on. But I'm not going to tiptoe around opinions. Again, this is by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans. So, if Grand Carnival isn't up to snuff, we're going to talk about that. If the food is great, we're going to talk about that. If the food portions are terrible, we're going to talk about that. We're going to have honest opinions, and no media day or pat on the back or construction photo is ever going to be worth sacrificing that dialogue we have with you, the listener.
Well, that's one of the things. That's one of the things, Ryan, that I've heard a lot from our audience. When I've run into them in the park, or when they message through social media, or our own channels with Tower Topics, is that they appreciate that we're genuine and authentic. And
we're not here to bash the park.
No, like I said, not at all.
I'm a cheerleader for the park in terms of I want it to be good, not that everything that they do is good. I'll bring up this example again. The Gazillion Bubbles show, on no less than 3 different occasions, I said it was a grown man blowing bubbles. It was 25 minutes of terrible boredom and then 5 minutes of awesome. So just watch it for the last 5 minutes. And I was the first to admit I was wrong. Like, it blew my mind. It was fantastic. I've recommended it to everybody. I've done shorts on it. We did a whole episode on it. But that's because that's the way I felt. It's not because, if I don't do this, then I won't be invited to media day for that water slide they're adding next year. I could not care less about that. Again, integrity is way more important than anything that they can offer you.
Yeah,
and if you're an upcoming creator,
they value that. They appreciate that with us. And if you go through our body of work with Tower Topics, or even the things that we've posted on our shared channels, our personal channels, 99% of what we talk about is highly positive of the park.
Yeah. And it's funny that looking at this document alone, you cannot always have bullet point 1 if you have the last bullet point. So does not support park values, integrity, courtesy, cleanliness, safety, service. Sorry, integrity, courtesy, inclusiveness, safety, service, and cleanliness. You cannot have integrity if you're always painting the park in a positive light.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Ryan. Okay. Now, everybody's going to, that wants to be invited to media day, everything's going to be the best thing ever, right? Anything they put on their social channels, post on KS Central, do a blog, whatever they're doing, because they want to make sure they get that invite. But what is the park accomplishing if nobody believes the content that these content creators are putting out there.
Okay, so there are two accomplishments that they get. They get the positive articles, and they get people saying that it's the greatest thing ever since the last greatest thing ever. With that particular group of people that are, let's call them simps, non-playable characters. The other thing that they accomplish is they have to invite less people to media day, so they save on the donuts that they buy.
Yeah, but nobody's believing the stories that even if
No.
they're positive, nobody's believing it. So what are you accomplishing?
Don, do you think, honestly, between you and I, off the record, although we're recording this, don't you think that integrity was kind of destroyed anyway? It started with Top Thrill 2. I feel like this is going to be an uphill battle with the creators because, anytime anybody says anything positive and it's like, I got to attend media day or whatever, or even looking back and, they did a video where they got to attend media day, and it's immediately going to be, you're a shill, if you have positive things to say, because Lord knows you can't go to media day and say like, Iron Menace was good, but Sheikah's better, because you're off the list. They're not going to work with you anymore. Right. You're off the list at that point. So yes, obviously whoever crafted this probably doesn't think integrity is really as important as they say it is by making it the first bullet point. But it's unfortunate, and I would request them to rethink it. But knowing a lot of the personalities involved.
Well, bottom line, if you are a content creator, like I said, you want credibility with your audience. That's going to matter more than those media day invites. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So we actually have another listener question. That might have been our new longest one, but that was supposed to be a 10 episode. But this is a really good question. So this is from Toby H. from Cincinnati, Ohio. He said, do you think Halloween Haunt will become Fright Fest in 2025 now that Cedar Fair is merged with Six Flags?
I think it's a distinct possibility. What about you, Ryan?
I think it's very possible. So the thing, though, is my only thought, okay, so when it comes to Kings Island, I think you might be right about the whole, like, you have to buy a wristband in order to go through the haunted houses or whatever. If you're right about that, then most certainly they have to change the name of the event, because that way you can make the argument of
it's been elevated.
It's been elevated. It's different. I know that the mazes were free last year, but that was Halloween Haunt. This is now Fright Fest. I would say that there's, within the next 3 years, there's probably like a 6 or 7 in 10 chance of us having Fright Fest at Kings Island.
Now, across the board, and we're talking, what they can do also. Remember, Fright Fest that has a sponsor. So across the board, there's more name recognition with Fright Fest than Halloween Haunt. So I think there's some more value with that name. So I don't know. I mean, they might not change it at all, but it's just, I do think it is within the realm of possibility.
Yeah. And it's also possible that Haunt could go to the Six Flags parks too, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But exactly. If all the Six Flags parks are doing the upcharge thing, it would make a lot more sense to make it Fright Fest at the Cedar Fair parks. And
now,
then
the one park though, I mean, Knott's Haunt, 40 plus years.
Knott's is not a Cedar Fair park.
Yeah, but they cannot possibly change that name. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting with the number of things that potentially could change within the next year or two.
Yeah, Knott's Berry Farm is its own beast. The event is 1,000 times better than any of the other parks around the entire chain, even the massive chain now. So I wouldn't worry about Knott's Berry Farm, but stupider things have happened, but yeah. Cool. Well, here's to a year, Don. Here's to many, many more years, and we'll be famous someday. Well, not just slinging t-shirts, but I'm Ryan Sir along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.